So I know that I'm barely squeaking it in under the wire on day 9 of this whole adventure. But I really wanted to get it in. Today it was Sunday, so I was just chilling with my family, playing tag in the park, just video games, tons of Minecraft, and yeah, just, taking it easy. Going to church, having some donuts, all that kind of stuff. So it's very late. It's like 10:30, I think, here, and I'm just doing this today. So we're gonna get in, and it's a really heavy topic too. So today is crazy, but I wanted to honor the questions that I've been getting, and one of them specifically is about, and I get this a lot, about suspense and error boundaries and how we can abstract around some of that repetitive work, and if we should or not. And I wanted to talk to that. Now, we're going to cover this later, but I've been getting enough questions about it, and enough kind of thoughts and proposals about ways that it could be like tidier, that I wanted to kind of talk about it now and just kind of let you know that this is on my mind. We will be covering it soon. So in order to properly demonstrate what we're talking about, I had to set up a totally different project. This is like basically like a week in the future, you will know all this kind of stuff. For now, you're just gonna have to take it kind of as said, but I will show you all the stuff that changed. So first of all, this is day 7. Okay, so this was kind of the last state that our app was in before I did the Q&A stuff. Now, it might be kind of hard to see, but if I hit reload on this right now, we'll see that the loading states pop in first immediately. So it was really fast. Hopefully it was fast enough for you to see it. But basically, for this component, loading state immediately, and then as the data comes in, then the data happens. Now, I want to show you something else. So this is React using Suspense in a concurrent environment. Now I'll show you how I changed that, but this is like not just using the Suspense component, but actually using it with the new architecture that allows all of the DOM nodes to update and render in a totally different way. So now I know that sounds super future, but this is important for kind of the question that I keep getting. So I want to show this off to you first. Effectively, there's not a whole lot of changes. I import an extra module here, which is called sleep, and that is used simply to delay this promise. So I'm making this a longer promise, and you'll see why in a second. But I'm just slowing this one down to be super mega slow. And I'm using this to fetch a single Pokemon resource. And you can see that here, I'm just spitting out that name. Okay, I have a resource detail, which is just a component that does our resource read, passes in the ID, and then pulls the name off of that object that we get back. Okay, so everything else down here is exactly the same as we had it on the 7th. And this I'll talk about in a second, because that's where the question stems from. And yeah, so the let's see. Oh yeah, the last thing, sorry, is I kind of added this, so like a second one here, where basically I have another suspense that is loading just a single Pokemon, and I pass in the resource ID. So I could change this to 4, and it said Charmeleon there. It's going to find another Pokemon, Charmander, right? Now you noticed that took a really freaking long time to reload. So if I hit this, and it's just a white page, it's just waiting there. Oh, sorry. Now it's the white page, and it's waiting. Okay. It took 3 seconds longer than the other one. Now, the final change that I had to make was basically, if you want to opt in completely into this new concurrent mode, basically you instead of just using render and passing in the app or the component you want to render, and then the node, you use create root, pass in where you want to render it, and then call render with just the component. slightly different way of doing it, but it ends up making a big difference. So the biggest difference that we have here is that these are like React is waiting until data is loaded from both of these to render. Now that wasn't the case in this one, because this part of the app renders, we see the dots for a split second, and then that component goes in. Now, there is a mechanism by which you can, only in concurrent mode, so we can recreate this behavior. So there is a way to do that. And effectively, if you are not using concurrent mode, everything is max duration 0 by default. So in here, it's max duration 0. It means that it is not going to wait for the other, like for the data to come back at all before it renders the fallback. Okay. So if we want to do this same thing down here, this is the behavior that we're seeing over on day 7. Let's delete that, and then we can just see that list. So again, we see just for a split second, boom, everything goes in. Now, actually, let's do it again. Now, so I know that request is pretty quick. So let's say like I'm willing to wait for about 3 seconds to not see that loading state flash in real quick. And that worked. So if I hit reload on this, because that's a fast endpoint, it's going to load and we're never going to see that loading. Take it away, and we'll see just for a split second. No, maybe not. The internet's fast when you don't want it to be fast, right? We might be able to break that again. Okay, so where that comes into play is I have, as I said before, I'm sleeping the resource for this, the single Pokemon resource. So you can see that this is loading for 3 seconds after the other data came back. I'll show you again. I hit refresh. I can see that after it transpiles, this data is all here. It renders. And then after a while, now this one shows up. And this is the behavior that we're kind of familiar with. But I can effectively combine these into one. So if I want all of that data to show up together, well, I can do that. I can just delete that, put these in the same suspense component, wait. I show that one loader, so I'm saying loading Pokemon and list. And now it's going to wait for that full 3 seconds before it renders any of it. So it has to have all of it before it renders any of it. Now, so what's the question? The question that I was being asked is that at the end of this day, we ended up with this Pokemon resource reading component, which is wrapped in Suspense, which has a fallback, which is wrapped again in an error boundary in case that promise rejects because the endpoint was bad or you're sending 500s from your server. And so the question is, why not just wrap all of this up into a single component, which is what I drew up here. Handled Pokemon collection. So effectively just pulling all of this into a single component and then just using that and knowing that your error and suspense and all of that kind of stuff is going to get handled. Now, again, I know that this is like kind of convoluted, but I have found that in an application, as you start tinkering with your user experience, moving items around in different kind of suspense wrappers is where a lot of that behavior or a lot of that work happens, right? So if I want these to render together, I put them in the same suspense component. If I want to render them separately, I move them out separately. And I would use kind of my knowledge of the endpoints, which one's going to return quick or slow, and make decisions about how those would render their own independent loading states. So, in our case, let's see. In our case, we know that this endpoint is fast, right? And so maybe we'll say, hey, we're willing to wait 300 milliseconds for that one because we know that it's fast and data will likely not take longer than that. So don't bother people with an extra spinner when we know that it's going to be fast. But maybe we know that this endpoint is super slow. Slow because we made it 3 seconds slower than the other one. Now, in that case, we do want to render that fallback right away so that people know this list is actionable, but this data is still kind of like in the process of getting rendered. So having these flexible is critically important, and you don't want to wrap them in this because you're just gonna have a lot of churn around your components. So what should you do then? Well, I think that it is very much possible to extract these in reusable ways without putting them all in a single component. And we'll talk about modules and things that will help you with this later. But I think it would be totally reasonable to have something like a component for Pokemon collection error boundary. And define that to have the kind of default fallback. Now, people don't have to use that in wrapping up the thing, but you're providing one that would show kind of a fallback in case there was an error around that endpoint, specific to that endpoint. And you could do stuff like the Pokemon collection, oops, can't get there, suspense component, right? And then this would have, this would, I guess I could just kind of copy and paste that out. Spread out props, so children and all that kind of stuff get applied, and yeah. Anyway, some syntax errors. Anyway, so I think that this is a much better way of thinking about that. Keeping things composable, not locking them down into a certain implementation that you are going to have to really rework all of these components as you want to change the user experience. Anyway, I wanted to answer that question. We are going to be covering all of this. I know it sounds like Greek to many of you at the moment. That's why I didn't include it in one of the kind of text lessons, because this would take way too long. But that is kind of where we're headed. And I wanted some of you to know that I'm thinking about it. And I promise we'll cover it. So yeah, that's a look into the future. I hope that it satisfies kind of your thinking around maybe building this. I definitely encourage you not to. Cheers. See you tomorrow.